name is Bonaventure. Welcome to our commercial class. Today, we are going to look at the law of property. By the law of property, we will look at the classification of property, property in land, that is private, public, and community land, interest in land, and also we look at intellectual property, things like trademarks, patents, and copyrights. So first of all, we want to classify property. You have heard of real property, and personal property. Real property is immovable property. Immovable property is property like land. You cannot move land. It's property like buildings. You cannot move a building. Where it is built, it will remain there until maybe some other distractions come about and it is done away with. Otherwise, it will always remain there. So, we also have tangible property. Tangible property are any property that you can touch, e.g. tables, chairs. Those are tangible property that one can touch, that one can use. Those are tangible property. We also have intangible property. For example, if you go and rent a shop somewhere, and where the shop is located is maybe at a junction where it will attract many clients because of its location at a place where many people meet while waiting vehicles to ferry them to where they want to go. So if you want to rent such a shop, the owner of the shop may tell you to pay extra amount, and that extra amount that you will pay instead of the actual amount, it will be called goodwill. Goodwill because it is located at a very strategic point where you will have very many customers, other than maybe if you had rented another shop at a backyard of that one. So those are things like goodwill. Those are intangible properties. So when it comes to land, we have private land and public land and community land. Public land is a land which belongs to the government. For example, a road is a public property. It is used by the public. So it is under the control of the government. The government will repair it. The government will open new ones. Also things like game parks and game reserves. Those are properties of the government. We also have agricultural land, lands which are controlled by the government. So that's also a public land. But also we have land which belongs to the community. For example, places where we have fields where people can play, can hold games. Those are community property. We have places where, for example, in an area in Western Province, in an area like in the former Western Province, in an area like Kaimosi, where certain forests are preserved for the inhabitants of that area to practice their rituals there, like circumcision, it can be held there. So those are community land. We also have some lands where there are areas where water and spring water can easily be found, and that area is protected for the catchment of water. That can also be a community land. That if you interfere with that area, the community itself will not agree because they get their water from there. So that can be a community land. We also have private land. Private land is land belonging to the individual. When an individual has land, that individual has a right to sell that land, to convert that land into anything he wishes to do. That is private land. And now you may ask yourself, how does one acquire title to land in Kenya? In Kenya, land could be allocated by the government to people. For example, there are areas where there are no people, and the government may decide to cede its land. Maybe it had an agricultural land somewhere, and because of the increase in population of the country, or maybe it's not actually bringing in enough income from the said land, the government may decide to allocate such a land to its people. The landless may be allocated land. So you can acquire title to land by allocation, by being allocated land. Also, there is also land adjudication. The government also may begin a process of adjudicating land into small pieces, and then it can also allocate to people. And those who might have acquired land in that way have a title to that land. The government may also take away land by compulsorily taking away, may take away land from people if it wants to use for the good of the community. For example, maybe it wants to set up an airstrip, that part of the country where communication by aeroplanes is not possible because there is no airstrip. So the government may come up and tell the inhabitants to move away from that area, and then it will have to give them money, then they go away. So it may take the land, that land becomes the government land. Also, we have also settlement programs Like when we gained independence, many Africans did not possess land. Land belonged to the white people, who are then great farmers in the valley and in other parts of the country. So such a land, when they were transferred from the colonialists to the inhabitants, people started being settled in various schemes. They could be given cows, wheelbarrows, with which to use while tilling the said land. So such a program of settlement schemes were there and are still there. For example, if a government wants to, like I gave an example of an airstrip, or wants to do what? To build a university, it may settle people elsewhere through those settlement programs. A person may also acquire title to land by leasing land. For example, when it comes to immovable property, you can use that property until you die. It's yours forever. But when it comes to immovable property, like land, according to the constitution, land in Kenya is held for 99 years. So once 99 years are over, that land reverts back to the government. So one can renew again. So if you are at 99 years, the owner of the land may not be alive. So his children or his grandchildren may renew for another 99 years. So those who renew will also acquire title to that land. They will also acquire title to that land. And land is a complicated thing, because how do people own land? When you look at the common law of England, people might own land by joint tenants. People might own land in a group. We call that joint tenant. But that joint tenants, people may decide to subdivide the land. When they subdivide the land, tenants in common ceases, and then each person is given his own title deed. Land also may be acquired by partitioning certain areas. When you partition a certain area and acquire a portion of that property, then if it was tenants in common, that tenants ends. You may also acquire land by buying land from those who have land. So land may be acquired through that method. So I talked of public land. Public land is actually government land. It's land lawfully occupied by the state. Land transferred from the the state by way of sale. People may decide to sell land for the state to build a hospital, to build a college, to build a university, to build a primary school. So you see, the government also may acquire land by purchasing land from the community, and it becomes public land. So public land generally is land belonging to the community. For example, land, when it comes to things like minerals and mineral oils found in land, 2 feet down deep in the ground, is no longer the community or the private property of an individual. It becomes the property of the government. The property of the government. So that if you trespass and go there with an intention of maybe retrieving whatever mineral is there, you will be held responsible, and you will be taken to court for having trespassed on a government land, for having trespassed on government property. And what constitutes the trespass to land? For example, if one has land and another person comes and crosses across that land where there is no way, then that act of crossing the land is trespassing on that land. And the owner of the land, which we will call a plaintiff, may come up and claim damages from you for crossing over his property. Also, you may stay in a property, in the property of somebody for some time. So you continue to stay in that property, farming, doing whatever you want to do. Sometimes you may be ejected from that property by court order, that you encroached on the private land of somebody. And you will be held, you will be liable for prosecution if that was so to happen. Although one may put up at fence that I had authority to pass through that land because I work with the survey of Kenya and we were surveying on how we could construct a road across that property. So it was inevitable that such a person crosses that land as he measures how the road will pass through that parcel of land. So he may come up with such a defense. Also, somebody may be licensed. To be licensed means you will be licensed by the owner to be using that land. So if the owner turns against him and tries to eject him, he may put up a very strong defense that he had been using that land maybe for more than 12 years and he had permission of the owner to stay there. And that will be a very good defense because you cannot stay on somebody's land for 12 years and yet he is present and then he turns against you and says that you are illegally encroaching on his land when he was physically present there himself. So maybe that charge of encroachment will not be held against you. It will fail if that was the judge preferred against such a person. So we have so many defenses when it comes to occupation of land, which I expect you to go through your textbooks with a view of trying to look at relevant laws governing the occupation of land in Kenya. Now, we have license. We also have what we call easements. When it comes to land, a license is a temporary thing. It's just given by the owner. It may be given by the owner to use his land for certain purposes, but for a while, and then he ejects you out after that. For example, if the City Council of Nairobi gives you a license to trade by the roadside, but then it may come up and say, roadside traders have become so many, and they are a cause for the many accidents occurring around around that road. They may come up again and eject you from the place where you were originally licensed to sell your goods or your wares. So a license is not a permanent thing. It is a temporary thing, and it is subject for renewal. But an easement is different from a license. An easement is created by an act of parliament. If parliament creates an act and says that area, a certain company will live there for oil exploration, so there is no time you can eject such a company from that area, because it is there legally and by the government's enactment of the law that puts that company to be where it is. So you see, an easement is very strong, but a license is a bit temporary. A license can even be verbal, but an easement cannot be verbal. Let us also look at the 6 words which are eligible to be considered as copyrights, to be considered for copyrights. For example, we have literary works, such as when one writes a book, a novel, he will have to be given a PIN number, and he will have to be protected, so that if any other person were to come up and copy the same thing and make it his and sell in his name, he will be protected, because there is an act dealing with such a literary matters. Musical works are also protected by copyrights, so that if you record your music and another person pirates your music and sells in his home, in his name, such a person is liable for damages in civil law. He will even be confiscated of any license to engage in the activities that he had been doing, and behind scenes he had been conning people, he had been pirating music of others. So such a person will be liable to pay damages to the owner of that work of music. We also have artistic works. One draws a picture of somebody, and another one comes up and takes the same picture and pretends that it was his, and sells that picture without the knowledge of the owner. If the owner discovers, he may take that person to court, and he will be liable to pay damages for having stolen the work of another person. We also have the broadcasting. You broadcast what is not yours. Then if it happens so, then you are also liable for damages. So my good students, we now come to the end of our lesson today on law of property. Do further research by reading widely and to see what was maybe left out in this lesson and make good of it. Bye bye for now.